Warning, dissociation episode portrayed. Tate sat on the kitchen counter, glass in his hand. Honestly, yes. I don't want to get married. Noah nodded. I know. I don't want to become involved with anyone. Another pause. I like my life. He looked toward the hallway. I know it's weird. It's not weird. It is. No. Tate gave him a look. Noah. I'm serious. Tate sighed. I don't want someone moving in and changing everything. I don't want expectations. I don't want someone asking where I am, what I'm doing, what I'm feeling, what our 5-year plan is. Noah smiled slightly. You really hate 5-year plans. I hate all plans. But the smile didn't last. I don't want to hurt hers. Noah nodded. I know. I don't want her to spend years hoping I'll become someone else. I care about lots of things. Not like this. Silence. You said losing Chloe would mean losing something. Tate didn't respond. But you also said losing this house, our routines, and our life would hurt. Another pause. That means both things matter. And he didn't know how to choose without losing something. Tate and Noah's relationship was the best it had ever been. Strangely enough, even with Chloe's presence in their lives, nothing between them had weakened. If anything, the changes around them had made Tate and Noah more certain of what they meant to each other. Chloe was there, but she wasn't a replacement. She wasn't someone who came in and took Tate away. Tate still took Chloe to dinner. They laughed together, talked for hours, and enjoyed each other's company. There was an ease between them, a friendship that sometimes looked like something more from the outside. But they were not exclusive. They were still dating other people. They were still figuring out what they were and what they wanted. Neither of them ever truly believed their relationship would end with a walk down the aisle. Not because they didn't care about each other. Because they understood each other. Tate had always had an almost instinctive resistance to marriage. The idea of it made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't always explain. It wasn't that he didn't believe in love, it wasn't that he didn't value commitment. It was the idea of being trapped inside a role that someone else had created for him. Marriage to Tate had always looked like another expectation, another label, another thing people wanted to attach to him was so they could understand him. And Tate hated being reduced to what other people expected him to be. He already lived a life that most people would consider unusual. His family, his responsibilities, the attention that followed him everywhere, it was complicated enough without adding a traditional life on top of it. He didn't want the version of happiness that other people had chosen for him. Noah understood that. He knew Tate didn't run from love. He ran to avoid losing himself. And maybe that was why what they had lasted so long, because Noah never asked Tate to become someone else. He never asked him to fit into a perfect picture. He simply loved the person who was already there. The person who came home every night. The person who reached for him in his sleep. The person who could give away a priceless family secret in the form of a tiny key, but still struggles to say 3 simple words out loud. Tate's life was complicated. His relationships were unconventional. But for once, he wasn't trying to escape the people who cared about him. He was letting them stay. Noah finished the last of his dinner, rinsed his plate, and wandered back into the living room. The television was off. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. He sat down on the couch with a tired sigh. There was plenty of room between them, at least 1 or 2 body lengths. Normally that was where Tate stayed. Instead, Tate shifted. Once. Then again. Until he was sitting directly beside Noah. Close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Noah glanced sideways. Tate. No answer. Tate was staring at him. Not casually. Not absent-mindedly. Just staring. His hazel eyes were fixed on Noah with an intensity that made Noah's stomach tighten. The expression wasn't angry. It wasn't playful. It wasn't the familiar look Tate gave him before making some sarcastic remark. It was thoughtful. Searching. Almost as if Tate were trying to solve a puzzle that had suddenly become important. Noah felt strangely self-conscious. What? Silence. Tate. Nothing. Noah laughed nervously. You're starting to creep me out. Still nothing. The longer Tate looked at him, the more uncomfortable Noah became. He looked toward the television. Then the coffee table. Then the hallway. Anywhere except Tate's eyes. What are you looking at? Tate spoke so quietly that Noah almost missed it. You. I gathered that. Another long silence. Noah shifted in his seat. Did I spill something on my shirt? No. Do I have food on my face? No. My hair? No. Then what? Tate didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. Noah's heartbeat picked up. Tate. Slowly, almost absent-mindedly, Tate lifted one hand. His fingertips lightly brushed the edge of Noah's ear, as though moving a loose strand of hair back or checking something that wasn't really there. The touch was brief. Gentle. Almost clinical. Noah froze. What are you doing? Tate blinked as if he'd only just realized what he'd done. I don't know. His hand dropped immediately back into his lap. I'm sorry. Noah studied him. You're acting really strange. I know. You've been staring at me for 5 minutes. I know. You touched my ear. I know. Another silence settled between them. Finally, Noah asked quietly. What are you thinking about? Tate rested his elbows on his knees and rubbed his face. I'm trying to understand something. What? Tate hesitated. I've spent 22 years knowing exactly what my life looked like. Noah listened. And now, in the space of one day. He shook his head. I don't know what it looks like anymore. Noah's expression softened. This is about Chloe. Tate nodded once. I keep thinking that if I choose one future. He looked around the room. I lose another. Noah didn't interrupt. I hate not knowing. I know you do. Tate gave a tired laugh. I really hate not knowing. Noah leaned back against the couch. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. I know. You gave yourself a week. I know. Then use it. Tate finally looked over at him again. This time the intensity in his eyes had faded. He looked exhausted instead. Thanks. Noah smiled. For what? For not pretending you know the answer. Noah shrugged. If I knew the answer to your life, I'd probably charge consulting fees. A reluctant smile tugged at the corner of Tate's mouth. That sounds like something you'd do. It absolutely is. For the first time that evening, the tension between them eased, replaced by the familiar comfort of two lifelong friends sitting quietly together, neither of them certain what the future held. The room had fallen completely silent. The clock ticked softly on the wall. Neither of them had spoken for several minutes. Tate was still staring ahead, lost in thought, when he suddenly shifted on the couch. Noah frowned. Tate. Without answering, Tate gently placed a hand on the back of Noah's shoulder. The gesture wasn't forceful. If anything, it was unusually careful. Noah looked at him with a puzzled expression. What are you doing? I don't know, Tate admitted honestly. Before Noah could ask another question, Tate guided him until Noah was lying across the couch, his head resting in Tate's lap. Noah blinked up at him. This is new. I know. Tate's voice was distant, as though he were thinking aloud more than speaking to Noah. For a long moment he simply looked down at him. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he began stroking Noah's hair. His fingers moved slowly through the blonde strands, separating them and smoothing them back into place. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't awkward. Noah stayed still, unsure whether moving would interrupt whatever was happening inside Tate's head. You okay? Noah asked quietly. I don't know. Tate continued running his fingers through Noah's hair. The repetitive motion seemed to calm him. You've always had ridiculously soft hair, Tate murmured. Noah laughed once. That's your observation. It's an observation. I might be it's your conditioner. What? A faint smile tugged at Tate's mouth. You use too much of it. I do not. You absolutely do. Noah rolled his eyes but didn't move away. He could tell this wasn't really about his hair. It was about Tate trying to ground himself. trying to make sense of feelings that had suddenly become far more complicated than he'd ever allowed them to be. After another quiet moment, Noah looked up. "You're thinking about Chloe." Tate didn't deny it. "I've known exactly where I belonged for 22 years. His fingers slowed. "Now I'm wondering if life is asking me to become someone different." Noah was quiet. "You don't have to become someone different," he said softly. "You just have to decide who you already are." Tate looked down at him. "I wish it were that simple." "So do I." The room fell silent again. Tate continued absent-mindedly smoothing Noah's hair back from his forehead, his thoughts clearly somewhere far away. Noah let him. After 22 years of friendship, he recognized the gesture for what it was. Not romance. Not a confession. Just the familiar way Tate reached for something safe whenever the rest of his world suddenly felt uncertain. Noah stayed where he was, his head resting comfortably in Tate's lap. The house was quiet. Neither of them seemed in any hurry to move. Tate continued absent-mindedly running his fingers through Noah's blonde hair, his thoughts clearly somewhere else. Several long moments passed before he finally spoke. His voice was so quiet, Noah almost didn't hear it. "When will you come back and visit me?" Noah frowned. "What?" Tate kept looking down at him, as though he were watching a future only he could see. "When will you come back and visit me?" Noah blinked. "Come back and visit you." He gave Tate a confused smile. "Why would I have to visit you?" Tate didn't answer. Noah laughed softly. "Tate, I live here." The words seemed to bring Tate back to the present. He looked around the familiar living room as if he'd momentarily forgotten where he was. A faint, embarrassed smile crossed his face. "No, seriously." Noah sat up a little, still looking at him with concern. "I live here." Tate's hand drifted from Noah's ear until his fingertips came to rest lightly against Noah's lips. The movement was slow, almost absent-minded, as though Tate hadn't fully realized what he was doing. Noah went completely still. "Tate." There was no answer. Tate's eyes remained fixed on him, but they seemed distant, preoccupied with thoughts Noah couldn't follow. His hand lingered for only a moment before his expression shifted. It was as though he had suddenly become aware of the gesture himself. Tate's head lowered to Noah's, and to Noah's shock, Tate planted a kiss on Noah's mouth. Noah's lips parted under the slow drag of Tate's fingers, the touch feather-light yet insistent, tracing the curve of his lower lip like he was memorizing every contour. The kiss that followed caught Noah completely off guard, warm, firm, and tasting faintly of the coffee they'd shared earlier. "I need you," Tate murmured against Noah's mouth between kisses, voice low and rough. "Noah makes it better, but it's not the same without you. Promise you'll come and visit me, make up an excuse, lie to Talia, I don't care, you have to come visit me, I miss you." The words vibrated against Noah's lips as Tate kissed him again, harder this time, pressing Noah back against the wall with the full weight of his body. Tate broke the kiss only to trail his lips along Noah's jaw, nipping at the sensitive skin there before returning to claim another deeper kiss. Noah felt his cock twitch in his pants, already half-hard from the intensity, the way Tate dominated the moment without hesitation. All of a sudden, Tate pulled his mouth away from Noah's. The kiss ended so abruptly that it left Noah blinking in surprise. Tate looked down at him for a long moment. His expression had changed. The warmth was gone. Something unreadable had taken its place. "I have to go." Noah frowned. "Go where, Tate?" Tate didn't answer. "Noah will be back soon." Before Noah could say another word, Tate stood up from the couch. He walked quickly toward the stairs without looking back. Noah remained where he was, watching him disappear onto the second floor. A moment later, he heard the bathroom door close. Then the lock clicked. Noah sat there in silence, wondering what had just happened. Noah sat completely still on the couch. For several seconds he couldn't move. He couldn't even figure out what he was feeling. His mind kept replaying the same moment over and over again. Tate is pulling away. Tate is looking at him. Tate saying, "I have to go, Noah will be back soon." Noah frowned. What the fuck just happened? The words came out quietly into the empty room. Because that was the part he couldn't understand. Tate had been looking directly at him. He had been talking to him. So why had he said Noah was coming back? Noah slowly leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Wait. The realization made his stomach tighten. Was he even talking to me? The question felt impossible. He and Tate had known each other for 22 years. Noah knew every expression on Tate's face, every change in his voice, every little sign that something was wrong. But this was different. Tate hadn't looked angry. He hadn't looked like he was joking. He had looked lost. Like for a brief moment, he wasn't completely in the room. Noah looked toward the staircase. The bathroom door upstairs remained closed. Tate. He said the name softly, almost to himself. What was going through his head? A few hours earlier, Tate had been talking about Chloe. About love. About marriage. About losing the life they had built together. About waking up one day and realizing everything familiar was gone. And now this. Noah ran a hand through his hair. Maybe Tate wasn't thinking about him. Maybe Tate was thinking about some future version of himself. A future where everything changed. A future where Noah wasn't sitting on the couch beside him anymore. A future where Tate had to explain why he was alone. But then why say it out loud? Why say Noah would be back when Noah was already there? The thought bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Because Tate was never confused about Noah. Not once. Noah had always been the constant. The person Tate came back to. The person he trusted when he trusted almost no one else. And yet tonight, Tate had looked at him like he was trying to find someone. Noah leaned back. I don't know what you're doing, Tate. The house stayed silent. For the first time in years, Noah felt like he was standing outside a door in Tate's mind that he couldn't open. Usually Tate let him in. Usually Noah knew what Tate was thinking before Tate even said it. But tonight there was something Tate couldn't explain. Maybe he didn't understand it himself. Noah looked back toward the stairs. He wanted to go ask. He wanted to demand answers. But he knew Tate. If Tate felt cornered, he would only retreat further. So Noah stayed where he was. He waited. Because whatever had just happened, one thing was clear. Tate wasn't running from Noah. He was running from something inside himself. Noah remained on the couch, staring toward the staircase. But the longer he sat there, the more one thought kept coming back. It wasn't just what Tate had said. It was the way Tate had looked at him. Or at least, what Noah thought was him. Because now Noah wasn't even sure. When Tate had been staring at him, there had been something in his eyes that Noah had never seen before. Not anger. Not confusion. Not even fear. It was something much deeper. Something Noah recognized immediately. He had seen that look before. The first time someone realized they were falling in love. The look of someone who had found something precious and didn't know what to do with it. The look of someone who was completely captivated. Noah knew that look. He had seen it on other people's faces. He had watched friends fall for someone, watched people become softer, more patient, more willing to risk things they had spent years avoiding. It was the look of a person whose walls had started coming down without permission. And that was what unsettled Noah the most. Because Tate had been looking at someone with that expression. But Noah wasn't sure it had been him. The thought hurt before he could stop it. No. He shook his head slightly. He didn't want to think that way. But he couldn't ignore what he had seen. Tate's expression didn't look like the way he looked at a friend. It wasn't the familiar affection of 22 years. It wasn't the protective loyalty they had always shared. It was something different. Something Noah had never been sure Tate was capable of showing anyone. Noah stared down at his hands. Who were you looking at, Tate? The question sat heavily in the quiet room. Because that was the part that terrified him. Not that Tate might change. Not that Chloe might become important. Not to mention that their routines might disappear. It was the possibility that Tate had discovered a feeling he had spent his entire life denying existed. And Noah had been standing right there. Close enough to see it and feel the weight of it. But not the person Tate was seeing. Noah swallowed. For the first time, he wondered if the thing Tate was afraid of losing wasn't just their house or their routines. Maybe Tate was afraid of losing the version of himself he had known. And maybe Noah was afraid of losing the version of Tate he had always loved as his closest friend. The house remained quiet. Upstairs, Tate was alone with whatever thoughts had driven him away. And downstairs, Noah sat with a realization he wasn't ready to say aloud. Whatever had been in Tate's eyes, it wasn't meant for him. 30 minutes later, Tate came down the stairs. Noah almost didn't recognize him. Not because Tate looked different. He was still Tate. Same black hair that was never quite in place, same sharp features, same hazel eyes that Noah had known since they were children. But the way he moved, that was different. Completely different. Noah had watched Tate walk for 22 years. He knew his stride. He knew the way Tate entered a room like he owned the space. The confident, almost intimidating way he carried himself. The way he walked when he was angry, when he was amused, when he was ready to argue with the entire world. Tate's walk was unmistakable. But this wasn't that. This was someone else. The person coming down those stairs looked like Tate, but he did not move like Tate. There was no familiar arrogance. No sharpness. No restless energy. No sense that Tate was already 3 steps ahead of everyone around him. Instead, he walked slowly. Carefully. Almost cautiously. Like he was unfamiliar with his own body. Like he was trying to imitate a person he had never been before. Noah watched him with growing unease. Tate. Tate didn't respond. He continued walking toward the couch, his expression blank but not empty. It was worse than that. He looked peaceful. And Noah had never seen Tate peaceful in that way. Tate was always fighting something. A thought. A feeling. A memory. A fear. But this version of Tate looked like he had stepped away from all of that. Like someone else had taken control. Noah sat still as Tate lowered himself onto the couch beside him. Not across from him. Not in his usual spot. Beside him. Noah felt his stomach tighten. Something was wrong. Not dangerous. Just unfamiliar. Tate, are you okay? Tate turned his head slowly. The look in his eyes made Noah hesitate. It was the same look from earlier. The look Noah couldn't explain. The look that didn't belong to the sarcastic, guarded man he had spent his entire life knowing. Tate lifted his hand. His fingers brushed Noah's cheek. Noah froze. Not because of the touch itself. Because of how unlike Tate it was. Tate was never gentle in a way he didn't understand. Never uncertain. Never quiet. But this felt like someone searching for something. Tate stared at him. Then he spoke. Do you have a girlfriend? Noah blinked. The question was normal. But the voice wasn't. Not exactly. It was Tate's voice, but the tone was unfamiliar. Softer. Almost like the person speaking had never learned Tate's usual defenses. Noah stared at him. What? Tate didn't change expression. Do you have a girlfriend? Noah didn't answer right away. Because he wasn't just listening to the question. He was watching the person asking it. And the person sitting beside him felt like a stranger wearing Tate's face. For the first time in 22 years, Noah wondered if he truly knew every part of Tate. Or if there had always been another version of him hidden underneath everything. The doorbell rang. The sound cut through the silence of the living room. Noah practically jumped. He had never been so relieved to hear someone at the door. Anything was better than sitting there trying to understand the person on the couch beside him. He glanced back at Tate. And the sight made his stomach twist. The man sitting there looked like Tate. But Noah knew with every instinct he had that something was different. The posture. The expression. The stillness. It wasn't the Tate he had grown up with. It wasn't the Tate who argued over everything, who walked into a room like he was challenging the world, who always had some sarcastic comment ready. This Tate was quiet. Too quiet. And that scared Noah more than anger ever had. He hurried to the front door and pulled it open. Andrew stood there. Hey, Noah grabbed his arm and pulled him inside so quickly that Andrew nearly stumbled. Whoa, what the hells? Noah shut the door behind him. Andrew looked at him. then looked toward the living room. His expression changed. Oh. Noah swallowed. He's doing it again. Andrew's face became serious. Again. Noah nodded. He's like a completely different person. His voice dropped. I'm serious, Andrew, he's scaring the hell out of me. Andrew looked over at Tate. Tate was still sitting on the couch, calm and silent, as if nothing unusual was happening. Noah moved closer to Andrew without even realizing it. Then he stopped. Because he realized what he was doing. He was hiding behind him. Andrew noticed. Under any other circumstance, it probably would have looked ridiculous. Noah, the person who had known Tate for 22 years, was standing behind someone else because Tate was sitting quietly on the couch. But Andrew didn't laugh. Not this time. Because he understood. This wasn't about Tate being angry. Noah dealt with an angry Tate. He knew how to handle sarcastic Tate, stubborn Tate, impossible Tate. This was different. Andrew lowered his voice. What happened? Noah looked back toward the couch. I don't know. His voice was barely a whisper. That's the problem. Andrew studied Tate for a moment. Did something trigger it? Noah hesitated. Chloe. Andrew looked at him. What about Chloe? Noah shook his head. Everything changed after they talked. He rubbed his face. He started talking about losing everything, the house, our routines, me. Andrew listened carefully. And then... Noah looked toward Tate again. And then he came downstairs like... He struggled to find the words. Like Tate wasn't Tate. Andrew stayed quiet. Noah whispered. He asked me if I had a girlfriend. Andrew frowned. What? I know. Noah shook his head. It was the way he asked. A pause. He looked at me like he was seeing someone else. Andrew glanced toward Tate again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Andrew gently touched Noah's shoulder. Okay. Noah looked at him. What do we do? Andrew looked toward the couch. We don't panic. Noah gave him a look. Easy for you to say. Andrew nodded. Fair. Then he lowered his voice. But we also don't pretend nothing is happening. Noah looked back at Tate. For the first time that night, he wasn't just confused. He was worried. Because whatever was happening inside Tate's head. Tate didn't seem to understand it either. Tate, or whatever was occupying Tate's expression and mannerisms in that moment, sat on the couch with a small, knowing smile. It wasn't Tate's usual smirk. Noah knew Tate's smirk. That one meant sarcasm was coming. It meant Tate was about to make an argument, tease someone, or act like he already knew he was right. This was different. This smile looked almost secretive. Like whoever was sitting there knew something nobody else in the room understood. Hello, Andrew. Andrew stopped. The voice made him pause before anything else did. It was Tate's mouth. Tate's face. But the voice was wrong. Completely wrong. Not just slightly different. Not just a change in mood. It wasn't Tate's usual sharp, controlled voice that carried confidence and a little bit of arrogance. It wasn't the voice Noah had heard for 22 years. This voice had a different rhythm. A different warmth. A different way of forming words. Andrew stared. Noah saw it immediately. Andrew was noticing it too. The same thing Noah had been trying to explain. The person sitting there looked exactly like Tate, but everything else felt unfamiliar. Andrew slowly sat down. He kept watching him carefully. Do you mind if I record you? The person on the couch tilted his head. Record me. Andrew pulled out a small tape recorder. I have this little tape recorder. We could make a birthday video or something to remember you by. The smile remained. My birthday isn't in May. Andrew blinked. Of course not. He gave a small laugh. But your birthday is in March. The expression on Tate's face shifted slightly. No. Andrew paused. No. My birthday isn't in March. The room went quiet. Noah felt a chill run through him. Because that wasn't a mistake Tate would make. Not about himself. My birthday is in the fall, Tate said calmly. Andrew stared. Then the strange smile returned. You're cute. Andrew looked at Noah. Noah looked back. Neither of them said anything. Because there were too many things happening at once. The drink in Tate's hand. The alcohol. Tate never drank. Not casually. Not to relax. Not socially. Never. Andrew noticed it too. Are you drinking? Tate looked down at the glass. Yes. Noah swallowed. Every little detail was wrong. The drink. The posture. The way he sat. Tate never crossed his legs like that, not comfortably, not casually. Noah had spent years watching Tate. He knew the difference between Tate being relaxed and Tate pretending to be relaxed. This was neither. It was like watching someone who had borrowed Tate's entire life but didn't know all the small rules. Then Tate's hand moved. He patted the couch beside him. Come sit by me, Noah. Noah froze. That was almost the strangest thing yet. Not the words. His name. Tate almost never said his name like that. After 22 years, Noah was usually just Noah. A look. A gesture. A nickname. But saying it so deliberately sounded unfamiliar. Noah slowly turned his head toward Andrew. His eyes said everything. Please don't make me. Andrew saw it. Under any other circumstances, it would have almost been funny. Noah, who had spent his entire life standing beside Tate through every argument, every disaster, every impossible situation. Now quietly asking someone else for backup. But Andrew didn't laugh. Because Noah looked genuinely unsettled. Andrew leaned forward slightly. Maybe we should just keep talking from here. The person on the couch smiled. That's fine. Noah stayed where he was. And Andrew noticed something that made the whole situation even stranger. There was no anger. No defensiveness. No Tate-like argument waiting to happen. Just calm. Almost too calm. Andrew looked at Noah again. And Noah whispered so quietly that only Andrew could hear. That's not him. Andrew didn't answer. Because for the first time since he walked through the door, he wasn't sure what to say. Do you like magic tricks? Tate asked. The question came out of nowhere. Noah blinked. Magic tricks. Tate smiled. Yes. Noah glanced briefly at Andrew, then back at Tate. I've always liked them. The answer seemed to please him. Good. Tate leaned back into the couch, looking almost entertained. Tell me about Tate. Noah froze slightly. Andrew noticed. What do you mean? Tate tilted his head. Tate. He said the name like he was talking about someone who wasn't sitting right there. Tell me about him. The room became quiet. Noah exchanged another look with Andrew. He hesitated. He's Tate. The smile on Tate's face remained. Is he dating anybody? Noah swallowed. Yes. A pause. Well, technically. He looked toward Andrew. Noah was visibly uncomfortable now. He was. Tate studied him. Is he dating a boy or a girl? Noah frowned. The question seemed strange coming from Tate. A girl. He answered slowly. Tate doesn't date boys. The silence afterward felt heavy. Tate looked at Noah. Then slowly a smirk crossed his face. Not Tate's normal smirk. Something exaggerated. Something almost theatrical. And then he started laughing. Not a normal laugh. It was higher, more playful, almost like a character in a movie who had just discovered a secret they couldn't wait to reveal. Andrew's eyebrows lifted. He kept the recorder pointed carefully. He had seen strange things in his life. He had known Tate for years. He had watched arguments, fights, impossible situations, and emotional breakdowns. But he had never seen anything like this. The laughter continued for another moment before Tate finally stopped. He looked between Noah and Andrew. You two are interesting. Noah shifted uncomfortably. Tate. The smile faded slightly. What? Noah didn't know how to answer. Because he didn't know who he was talking to. Andrew lowered the recorder a fraction, still watching closely. The most unsettling part wasn't the unusual behavior. It was how natural it seemed to Tate. Like he wasn't performing. Like for that moment this was simply who he was. And Noah more than anyone knew how impossible that felt. Tate's hand reached up and ruffled Noah's hair. The gesture alone would have been familiar. Normally, Noah would have rolled his eyes and pushed him away. But nothing about the moment felt familiar. You always have long hair, Noah, Tate said. Noah stared at him. The comment immediately felt wrong. Not because Tate had never had opinions. Because Tate's opinion about Noah's hair had always been the opposite. For years, Tate had defended Noah whenever anyone teased him about it. He had always liked the way Noah looked. He had always said it was part of who Noah was. But now Tate was looking at him like he was seeing something completely different. I don't like long hair, Tate said. Noah didn't answer. I don't like feminine things. Andrew noticed Noah's expression change. That wasn't just an unusual comment. That was completely unlike Tate. Tate had never talked that way about Noah. Not once. Noah slowly moved away, putting more space between them. Andrew watched carefully. Whoever was sitting in front of them seemed to be saying things that didn't match the person they knew. Then Tate looked at Noah with a strange expression. Don't worry, Noah. The way he said Noah's name was unsettling. I don't want whatever you have. A pause. I want the exact opposite. He laughed softly. Noah looked at Andrew again. The message was obvious. Something is wrong. Andrew continued recording not because he found it entertaining, but because he wanted to remember the details later. Every word. Every change. Every inconsistency. Tate leaned back. You're all a bunch of idiots. Andrew raised an eyebrow. Tate turned toward him. And you? He studied Andrew. Are you a psychologist? Andrew didn't answer immediately. Tate. No. The smile returned. Have you gotten your doctorate degree? Andrew stared. The question was strange enough on its own. Then Tate added. I know you're a recent graduate from Brown, it's 1990. Andrew went still. Noah looked confused. Andrew slowly lowered the recorder. It's 1994. The room became silent. Tate stared at him. For a moment the confidence slipped. Only for a second. Then the expression returned. You're an idiot. Andrew watched him carefully. You know that. Noah looked uncomfortable. Because the words sounded like something Tate might say during an argument. But the tone was wrong. Everything was wrong. The person sitting there had pieces of Tate. Fragments. The sarcasm. The confidence. The intelligence. But they were arranged differently. Like someone had taken pieces of a familiar person and built something new. Andrew looked at Noah. Noah looked scared. Not because Tate was being cruel. Because Noah couldn't find his friend inside the behavior happening in front of him. And that frightened him more than anything else. You are the most blind psychologist I've ever seen. Tate said it while staring directly at Andrew. The confidence in his voice was unsettling. It wasn't the irritated confidence Noah knew. It wasn't the sharp, argumentative Tate who could debate a subject for hours and refuse to admit he was wrong. This was different. It was almost playful. Like he was enjoying watching Andrew try to understand something that made no sense. Andrew kept the recorder steady, but his eyes never left Tate. Tate leaned back on the couch. Actually, a slow smile crossed his face. That's rather funny if you think about it. Andrew frowned. What is? Tate tilted his head. Andrew isn't really your name, is it, Andrew? The room went quiet. Noah looked immediately toward Andrew. For the first time all night, he wasn't just watching Tate. He was watching Andrew. Because Tate had said it with such certainty. Like he knew something nobody else knew. Andrew's expression changed slightly. Not fear. Surprise. No one noticed. Tate. But Tate ignored him. Everyone thinks they have a finely tuned instrument. He tapped his fingers lightly against the arm of the couch. You all think you have a perfect little tuning fork when it comes to evaluating Totem, but you're all a bunch of morons. His smile grew. But you're just as blind as everyone else. Andrew stared at him. What are you talking about? Tate laughed quietly. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It was almost amused. You really don't know. Noah felt a chill. Because this was the part that bothered him most. Tate wasn't rambling. He wasn't acting randomly. He sounded like he believed every word he was saying. Like he was following a conversation that only existed inside his own head. Of course you don't have any clue, but you should with your background. You're lucky, Andrew, Tate continued. I find you funny. Andrew exchanged a glance with Noah. Noah looked completely lost. Tate looked around the room. If I thought, Andrew, you were a rival or getting in the way of what I want, you would disappear. I've made people disappear before. You two are boring. Then his eyes moved back to Noah. And you? The smile faded. The shift was immediate. Noah noticed. Andrew noticed. Everyone noticed. Tate leaned slightly forward. Touch or seduce Tate. He stopped. His voice lowered. The words that came out of Tate's mouth made the entire room go still. And I'll break your neck while you struggle while I'm holding you in the air or while you're slumbering next to Tate in bed, Tate said coldly in a deep, unknown voice. And I'll bury you with the other bodies. The tone was the part that frightened Noah the most. Not the words. The certainty behind them. Noah froze. Andrew watched carefully. There was anger there now. Possessiveness. Something intense that didn't match the Tate they knew. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. Noah looked at Andrew. Andrew looked back. Who are you? Andrew's question cut through the room. For the first time all evening, he didn't sound curious. He sounded serious. Careful. Not Tate's smile. Something colder. Something that made Andrew sit a little straighter. You really think you figured it out? Andrew didn't answer. He kept watching. The stranger leaned back against the couch. I'm your worst nightmare, Andrew. Andrew studied him. Keep digging. The stranger's eyes narrowed. Keep putting your nose where it doesn't belong. A pause. And eventually you'll regret it. People have died by putting their nose in places they don't belong. Noah stood quietly near Andrew, watching every movement. Every word. Every expression. Because this wasn't Tate. Or at least it wasn't the Tate he knew. The stranger turned his attention away from Andrew and looked at Noah. The change in expression was immediate. You. Noah froze. The stranger tilted his head. You need to stop. Noah frowned. Stop what? The stranger smiled faintly. Stop acting like everyone and everything's normal. Andrew glanced at Noah. Noah looked genuinely confused. The stranger continued. Tate will never be what you want him to be, he's not available. The words hit harder than Noah expected. Not because he believed them. Because they sounded like they were aimed at something deeper. Something personal. Something the stranger thought he knew. Noah's face tightened. You don't know anything about me. The stranger laughed softly. Don't I? Noah stared at him. For a moment he couldn't find the words. The stranger sitting in Tate's place looked back at him with a confidence that made Noah's skin crawl. It wasn't just the unfamiliar voice or the strange mannerisms anymore. It was the certainty. The person wearing Tate's face looked like he knew Noah. Not casually. Not like someone who had heard a rumor or made a lucky guess. Like someone who had been watching him for years. Noah slowly shook his head. I've never met you before. The words came out firmly. He needed them to be true. Because everything about this situation was impossible. Tate had always been Tate. Difficult, stubborn, sarcastic, brilliant, impossible to read at times, but still Tate. This person looked at Noah like he was a stranger who had wandered into a conversation that had been going on long before he arrived. The smile that appeared on Tate's face was unsettling. Not the familiar smirk Noah had seen 1,000 times. Not the expression Tate wore when he was about to make a joke or prove a point. This smile was different. It was almost amused. Almost victorious. That's funny, the stranger said. Noah frowned. What is? The stranger leaned back comfortably. That you think you don't know me. We've slept together, Noah, and I've watched you in Tate's bed while you slumber for years. Andrew watched from nearby, saying nothing. He was studying every movement, every shift in expression. Because whatever was happening, this wasn't just Tate being angry or emotional. Something about this felt completely disconnected from the person they knew. The stranger looked back at Noah. I know all about you, Noah. Noah felt his shoulders tense. No, you don't. The stranger smiled wider. Don't I? A quiet laugh escaped him. You always assume nobody notices. Noah didn't respond. The stranger continued. You think because you've been beside Tate for so long that nobody else can see what's happening. Andrew glanced at Noah. He noticed the slight change in his expression. The words had hit something. You're just a voice inside Tate, but you're not Tate, Noah said. The stranger noticed too. You're wrong on all accounts, Noah. I'm not just the voice inside Tate. I've been inside Tate, if you know what I mean, the stranger smiled lewdly. You really did choose the most complicated fucked up person in California, didn't you, Noah? Noah looked away. Stop. The stranger tilted his head. Tate isn't available because I'm inside him right now. I bet you're jealous, aren't you? The statement hung in the air. Andrew watched Noah carefully. There was something painful about the way Noah went quiet. Not because he believed this person. Because coming from Tate's face, even false words carried weight. You both will keep spinning around like a top because those answers you seek are just out of reach. Tate isn't who you think he is, and he'll deny anything's wrong until I come for a few minutes to help him cope. The stranger seemed to enjoy the silence. Then his attention shifted. Away from Noah. Toward Andrew. And you. Andrew looked up. The stranger studied him for a long moment. A slow smile returned. Andrew Lott is not your real name, is it? The room changed. Noah looked immediately at Andrew. Andrew didn't answer. The stranger noticed. There it is. Andrew's expression hardened. How do you know that? The stranger leaned back looking pleased. Because you're not as good an actor as I am. Andrew stared at him. Noah looked between them. The strange thing was that the stranger wasn't shouting. Wasn't angry. Wasn't trying to intimidate them in the way Tate normally would. He was calm. Almost entertained. Like he knew something everyone else was still trying to figure out. The stranger smiled. I'm the one who told Tate. Andrew went still. What? The stranger's eyes stayed on him. You heard me. A pause. Anyone who comes near Tate I have followed by a private investigator or their life is researched like past history. Maybe you should tell Noah why you changed it. Andrew didn't move. Noah looked confused. Changed what? The stranger smiled faintly. That's the interesting part. He looked between them. Everyone has a story, don't they, Anthony Marlowe Lee Strong? The stranger stared at Andrew. Then his eyes returned to Andrew. But what's really interesting is why you've changed it 4 times. Andrew's face changed. Just slightly. But enough. No one noticed. How do you know about that? The stranger laughed quietly. Because you're not as good at hiding things as you think. Blackmailers come calling and you scare pretty easily. Noah stared at him. Andrew remained silent. The stranger leaned forward slightly. And the things people hide are always the most interesting. His smile became almost knowing. How's your mother? The room fell silent. Andrew's expression changed immediately. The stranger continued, watching him closely. You know, the one that blew her head off. Did your aunt kill your mom or did your mother kill your aunt? A pause. He smiled again. Like he knew something nobody else did. Like he was holding a piece of information that the rest of the room didn't even know existed. Noah looked at Andrew. Andrew looked unsettled for the first time. And that was what frightened Noah most. Because no matter who this was, no matter what was happening to Tate, the stranger had found a way to make everyone in the room question what they thought they knew. Tate smiled. It wasn't the same unsettling smile from before. It was quieter. Almost like he was amused by a joke nobody else understood. Have you heard of Ted Bundy? Of course you have. Ted grew up believing his biological mother was really his sister while the mom he knew his whole young life was really his grandmother. Is this ringing any bells, Anthony? Excuse me, Andrew. Andrew scowled at Tate. The stranger smirked at Andrew and Noah then spoke. The real question isn't who I am. Andrew watched him carefully. Then what is the question? Tate leaned back. When are we? The room went silent. Andrew frowned. When are we? And where are we? Andrew looked at Noah. Noah looked just as confused. Because the question didn't make sense. It wasn't the kind of strange statement Tate usually made when he was being sarcastic. There was no punchline coming, no obvious argument waiting behind it. Andrew looked back at him. Who are you? Tate smiled. You're still asking the wrong question. Andrew didn't look away. Then answer it. For a moment Tate simply stared at him. Then he gave a small laugh. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Andrew crossed his arms. Try me. Tate's smile widened. Isn't that right, Rip Van Winkle? The stranger looked at Noah and smiled at the cute nickname he had given Noah. The nickname made Andrew pause. Noah noticed immediately. The stranger caught that reaction. The smile returned. Say. He looked around the room. Everyone thinks they know what they're looking at. His eyes moved back to Noah. But they only know what they're willing to see. Noah remained still. There was something different about the way the stranger looked at him now. Less threatening. More like he was waiting for Noah to understand something. I know 3 secrets, but you'll have to wake up to find out what they are, Noah. Noah frowned. What secrets? The stranger tapped his fingers lightly against the couch. I know 3 secrets. He repeated it almost like a child teasing someone with hidden information. Secrets nobody else knows. Andrew watched him. And what is it? Tate's smile became smaller. More serious. It's a doozy. The room fell quiet. For a moment the strange confidence disappeared. Something almost sad replaced it. Then he looked at Noah. When I'm gone. Noah felt a chill. What do you mean gone? The stranger didn't answer directly. Don't tell Tate. Noah stared. The words sounded impossible. Why? The stranger looked toward the stairs. Tate doesn't like it when I come around. His fake seizures are a product of me showing up or being discussed by other people. No one spoke. Andrew looked at Noah. Fake seizures, Andrew whispered. Noah looked back. Because that sentence was the closest thing to an explanation they had gotten all night. Not a name. Not a reason. Just a warning. The person sitting in front of them knew Tate. Maybe better than anyone should. And yet somehow he spoke about Tate like they were 2 separate people. The stranger settled back into the couch. The confident smile returned. Now. He looked between them. Who wants to pretend everything is normal? Andrew and Noah looked at each other. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The look they exchanged said everything. Did you hear that? Did you see that? What the hell is happening? For once, neither of them had an explanation. Andrew, who usually searched for patterns and explanations, sat completely still with the camcorder still in his hand. Noah, who had spent his entire life believing he understood Tate better than anyone else, looked like he had run into a wall he couldn't climb over. The person sitting in front of them noticed. Of course he noticed. He noticed everything. A slow smile crossed Tate's face. Who wants to pretend everything's normal? The question hung in the room. Noah stared. Andrew didn't move. The stranger looked between them, clearly entertained by their silence. Oh. A small laugh escaped him. That's right. He leaned back. It's my job to reset the room after I dissociate. The words were said with such confidence that neither Noah nor Andrew knew how to respond. My job. He repeated it almost like he was reminding himself. The smile became almost playful. Until next time, losers. A pause. Then he looked around the room. God. He laughed. If Tate could only see the looks on your faces. He shook his head, amused. That is so funny. Noah felt his stomach tighten. Because it wasn't just the words. It was the way the stranger seemed to enjoy the confusion. Like this entire situation was a performance, and they were the audience. Then slowly the expression changed. The smile faded. The confidence disappeared. Tate lifted both hands and ran them through his hair. The movement was simple. Normal. But Noah noticed immediately. Everything changed. The posture. The expression. The way he held himself. It was like someone had stepped away and Tate had suddenly returned. His shoulders dropped slightly. His face relaxed. The strange energy in the room vanished. Tate blinked. Once. Twice. Then he looked around. The first thing he noticed was Andrew, holding the camcorder, recording him. Tate frowned. Why are you filming me? His voice. Noah froze. His voice was back. The familiar tone. The familiar rhythm. The familiar Tate. Not the strange version from moments before. Not the person who spoke like he knew secrets nobody else knew. Just Tate. Tate looked from Andrew to Noah. Then he stopped. Because Noah's expression wasn't normal. Noah looked pale. Frozen. Like he had just seen something impossible. Tate's eyebrows pulled together. Why are you looking at me like that? Noah didn't answer. He couldn't. How was he supposed to explain? How was he supposed to say? You weren't you. How could he describe something that sounded impossible even inside his own head? Andrew lowered the camcorder slightly. He was watching Tate carefully now. Not as a friend. Not as someone filming something interesting. As someone trying to understand. Tate looked between them. Okay. He glanced at the camera again. Did I miss something? The question was so normal that it almost made Noah more unsettled. Because the person standing there seemed completely unaware. Like he had walked back into the room after stepping away for a few minutes. Like nothing had happened. Noah looked at Andrew. Andrew looked back. Neither of them said the obvious thing. Neither of them knew how. Because sitting in front of them was Tate. But for a while tonight, it hadn't been. Noah felt the fear settle in after Tate came back. Not the kind of fear he felt when Tate was angry. That was familiar. He knew angry Tate. He knew how to argue with him, how to calm him down, how to wait out the storm. This was different. This was the feeling of realizing there was a part of someone you loved that you didn't understand. The stranger's words kept replaying in Noah's mind. The confidence. The way he spoke was as if he knew things he shouldn't know. The way he talked about watching him. The way he talked about Tate as if he and Tate were two separate people sharing the same space. The way they had been said. The stranger had looked at him through Tate's eyes and spoken with a confidence that made Noah's skin crawl. We slept together. Those words kept replaying in his mind. Because that was different. That wasn't the same as saying he had watched them. That wasn't the same as saying he had been nearby or knew something about them. It was a claim. A claim that this person had a history with Noah. A history Noah didn't remember. Noah sat frozen on the couch, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. I don't know you, he whispered. And that was the part that terrified him. Like there was some hidden connection between them. Like there was a story happening that Noah had somehow missed. Andrew noticed the look on his face. Noah. Noah looked up. He said we slept together. Andrew went quiet. Because he understood why that bothered Noah. It wasn't just the words themselves. It was the idea behind them. Someone had taken Tate's face, Tate's voice, and Tate's presence and claimed a memory that Noah didn't have. A moment that belonged to his own life had suddenly been rewritten by someone else. If the stranger had said he had watched them, that would have been terrifying in a different way. It would have meant someone was observing them. A presence outside their lives. But this was different. This was someone saying, I was there. I was part of this. Noah wrapped his arms around himself. Who was that? The question came out quietly. Andrew didn't answer immediately. Because he didn't know. Nobody did. The most unsettling part was that the stranger didn't seem like he was simply pretending to be Tate. He talked like he knew Tate. Like he knew Noah. Like he knew things hidden deep inside both of them. And then just as quickly as he appeared, Tate had returned. The familiar Tate. The one who looked confused. The one who asked what he had missed. Noah looked over at him. And for the first time in 22 years, he wondered if there were parts of Tate that existed completely outside his understanding. Parts that even Tate himself might not know how to explain. Noah's stomach twisted. He felt exposed. Violated. Not because he understood what had happened, but because he didn't. That was the worst part. He couldn't tell what was real. He couldn't tell what something Tate meant to say, what Tate believed, or what was something else entirely. Noah looked across the room at Tate. The familiar Tate. The one who was now sitting there, confused, watching everyone react to him. And somehow that made it worse. Because Noah knew Tate. He knew every expression, every movement, every habit. But tonight, he had seen something he had never seen before. A version of Tate that felt like a stranger. Something about it felt horribly familiar, though. Not familiar because Noah knew that person. Familiar because it reminded him of every moment Tate had pushed people away, every time he had hidden behind anger, sarcasm, or cruelty instead of admitting he was hurt. Maybe that was what scared Noah most. Maybe the stranger hadn't come from nowhere. Maybe it had come from somewhere inside Tate that had been buried for years. Noah's breathing became uneven. Without realizing it, he pulled his knees toward his chest and curled into himself on the couch. Andrew noticed immediately. Noah. Noah didn't answer. He stared at the floor. I don't know what's happening. His voice was quiet. I don't know who that was. Andrew moved closer, careful not to overwhelm him. You're here. Noah shook his head. But what if it happens again? The question came out small. What if next time it's worse? Tate looked hurt and confused. Noah. But Noah flinched slightly. Not because of Tate. Because his mind was still trying to separate the person in front of him from the person he had just seen. For the first time in his life, Noah wasn't afraid of losing Tate because of an argument or a choice. He was afraid because he had seen a side of Tate that he couldn't explain. And he didn't know if the person who came out next would be someone who loved him, or someone who didn't know him at all. Andrew made a decision. He wasn't going to show Tate the recording. Not yet. The camcorder stayed hidden away, tucked safely out of sight. The tape recorder and everything he had captured remained in his pocket, untouched. Because Andrew didn't know what he had recorded. And more importantly, he didn't know how Tate would react. If Tate truly had no memory of what happened, showing him immediately could do more harm than good. If there was some explanation, some reason for the strange behavior, Andrew wanted to understand it before putting something impossible in front of him. So he said nothing. The rest of the day passed strangely normally. Almost too normal. Tate sat in front of the television watching videos like he always did. He made comments. He laughed at parts he found funny. He argued with the screen when something annoyed him. The familiar Tate slowly returned. The sarcastic one. The stubborn one. The one Noah had spent most of his life knowing. And yet Noah couldn't fully relax. Because he kept remembering the other version. The voice. The smile. The things that had been said. Every so often, Noah would glance at Tate just to make sure he was still there. Tate noticed once. What? Noah looked away. Nothing. Tate narrowed his eyes. You're acting weird. Noah almost laughed at the irony. Instead, he just shook his head. Long day. Tate accepted that answer, but Noah knew him well enough to know he noticed more than he admitted. Whatever Tate was something that seemed to change without warning. And nobody knew why. Around 9 o'clock that night, the quiet routine of the evening broke. Tate suddenly stiffened. Noah recognized it immediately. Tate. The seizure wasn't a major one. It was brief. Small. But that didn't make it any less frightening. Noah moved quickly, staying close and making sure Tate was safe until it passed. Andrew watched silently, his earlier questions temporarily forgotten. For a few moments, nobody cared about the strange conversation or the impossible things Tate had said. They only cared about Tate. When it ended, Tate lay back on the couch exhausted. His breathing slowly returned to normal. Noah sat beside him. A few minutes later, Tate shifted and rested his head in Noah's lap. The familiar gesture almost hurt. Because it reminded Noah of everything that had always been true between them. The trust. The closeness. Tate's eyes remained closed. His voice was quiet. Chloe. Noah looked down. What about Chloe? But Tate didn't answer. Whatever thought had been forming disappeared as exhaustion took over. Within moments he was asleep. Noah stayed still, looking down at him. Andrew watched from across the room. Neither of them spoke, because the questions from earlier were still there. But now there was another one. Was the stranger connected to what happened to Tate? Or had Tate's mind simply opened a door that nobody knew existed? Noah gently brushed Tate's hair back. For all the fear and confusion, one thing remained clear. This was still Tate. The person who trusted him enough to fall asleep with his head in Noah's lap. And that was the part that made everything so much harder to understand. He needed someone who could look at it without the emotional attachment, someone who could analyze what he had seen instead of reacting to it. So he took the camcorder recording to the person he trusted most in his academic work. Dr. Michael Xavier had been mentoring Andrew through his doctorate program, which Andrew had begun the previous fall. Xavier had spent years studying human behavior, memory, and trauma responses. He was the kind of person Andrew needed in a situation that seemed impossible to explain. Andrew placed the recording on the desk. "I need you to watch something." Dr. Xavier looked at him. "Something for your research." Andrew hesitated. "Something personal." That got his mentor's attention. The footage played. The room stayed quiet. Dr. Xavier watched Tate's posture, his expressions, his voice, and the way he interacted with Noah and Andrew. When it ended, Xavier didn't speak. He rewound it. Watched it again. Finally, Dr. Xavier leaned back in his chair. "Well," he looked at Andrew. "What do you think?" Andrew frowned. "I was hoping you would tell me." Xavier gave a small nod. "It's difficult to say without knowing the young man." He tapped his fingers lightly against the desk. "I need context. I need to know what Tate is normally like, his baseline behavior, his personality, how he speaks, how he interacts with people." Andrew nodded. "I've known him for years. And this person on the recording." Andrew looked down. "That's not the Tate I know." Xavier glanced back at the screen. "That's what stood out to me." He paused the footage. "This recording shows a very different person." Andrew stayed silent. Xavier continued carefully. "My first thought would be that Tate may have been dissociating." Andrew looked up. "Dissociating? Possibly." Xavier folded his hands. "Dissociation can happen when someone experiences something overwhelming. The mind can create distance from emotions, memories, or even a person's sense of identity as a way of protecting itself." Andrew listened closely. "So you're saying he became someone else?" "Not exactly." Xavier chose his words carefully. "More that he may have entered a state where a different part of himself took control." Andrew looked back at the paused image of Tate. The expression on Tate's face was unfamiliar. But he said things he couldn't know. Xavier nodded. "That is the part we need to understand." He looked at Andrew. "Sometimes people in altered states can reveal memories, beliefs, fears, or information that they have processed without consciously remembering it." Andrew frowned. "And the way he talked about not remembering." Xavier considered that. It could suggest a separation between different emotional states or memories. A pause. Perhaps something he doesn't want to remember. Andrew was quiet. "Trauma? Possibly." Xavier leaned back. "An event, a painful memory, something his mind associated with danger." He looked at the recording again. "The person you saw may not be someone new." Andrew understood what he meant. "You think it was still Tate?" "I think it was part of Tate." The word stayed with Andrew. "A part. Not a stranger. Not someone who had appeared from nowhere. Something inside." Xavier continued. "Something happened that has caused Tate to retreat into a version of himself that carries something he cannot consciously access." Andrew looked troubled. "So what do I do?" Dr. Xavier was quiet for a moment. "First, you don't confront him." Andrew nodded. "And second, remember that the person in that recording was still a human being." Xavier looked at him. "Something caused that reaction. The important question isn't just who appeared." He glanced at the screen. "It's why Tate needed someone else to appear at all." "I disagree." Andrew's voice was quiet but certain. Dr. Xavier looked up from the recording. Andrew wasn't dismissing the possibility casually. Xavier could tell from his expression that this was something Andrew had been wrestling with since the moment he left Tate's house. I don't think that was Tate. Xavier leaned back slightly. Andrew. No. Andrew shook his head. I know him. I've known Tate for 8 years. I've seen every version of him imaginable. Andrew looked toward the paused image on the screen. I've seen him angry, I've seen him scared, I've seen him after seizures, I've seen him when he's exhausted, overwhelmed, frustrated, or acting completely irrational. He turned back toward Xavier. I know his mood changes, I know his personality shifts, I know when he's being sarcastic, when he's joking, when he's trying to hide something. A pause. But that. Andrew looked back at the recording. That wasn't any of those things. Dr. Xavier studied him. What was different? Andrew took a moment before answering. Everything. He gestured toward the screen. The way he moved, the way he sat, the way he spoke, the way he looked at us. His voice lowered. It wasn't like Tate was having a bad moment. Andrew swallowed. It was like someone else was there. Xavier didn't interrupt. And the worst part. Andrew looked uneasy. The person was familiar. That caught Xavier's attention. Familiar how? Andrew shook his head. That's the part I can't explain. He looked frustrated. I've met that person before. There were things about him that felt like I should recognize him. He glanced back at the recording. The confidence, the way he talked, the way he knew exactly what to say to hurt people. Andrew paused. It felt like he wasn't a stranger. Xavier considered that carefully. So you believe this was not simply a change in Tate's mood or behavior? No. Andrew answered immediately. I think something happened where Tate wasn't the one in control. Andrew leaned forward, his hands clasped together as he tried to put words to something he still couldn't fully explain. I don't think Tate has a split personality. I don't think this is multiple personalities or some kind of personality disorder. Dr. Xavier listened carefully. Then what do you think it was? Andrew looked back at the recording. I think Tate's body was trying to say something that Tate himself couldn't. The room became quiet. Andrew continued. Something came out, something that Tate doesn't know how to express, or maybe something he doesn't even know is there. He shook his head. I've known Tate long enough to know that he keeps things buried. He doesn't talk about things that hurt him. He turns everything into anger, sarcasm, or a joke. Andrew paused. So what if this wasn't a repressed version of Tate? Xavier watched him. What if it was a fear of his? Andrew looked down at the floor. Maybe somebody scared him when he was young. His voice lowered. Maybe it was a teacher, someone who had power over him, someone who made him feel small or helpless. He looked back at the recording. Maybe it was somebody who made such an impression on him that Tate's mind kept that person somewhere deep inside. Andrew rubbed his forehead. I don't know who it was. A pause. But whoever that was. He pointed toward the screen. That wasn't just some random creation. Xavier remained silent. Andrew continued. The way he talked, the things he knew, the way he looked at Noah. His expression changed. Whoever that was felt real. He leaned back. And that's what bothers me. Because Noah met him. Xavier looked thoughtful. Explain. Andrew looked at him. The person in that recording didn't talk like he was imagining Noah, he talked like he knew Noah. A long silence followed. That means either Tate knows something he has never told us. Andrew looked toward the recording again. Or someone knows Tate better than we realize. Xavier studied him. And you think this person exists? Andrew hesitated. I don't know. He chose his words carefully. But what if he does? The thought hung between them. What if the person Tate became wasn't remembering something from the past? Andrew looked uneasy. What if he was recognizing something happening now? Xavier didn't respond. Andrew continued. What if this person is alive? A pause. What if Tate doesn't even know? He looked back at the screen. What if someone from his past is still out there? His voice dropped. Watching him. The idea clearly unsettled him. Whoever that was knew things about Tate, things we don't know, things Noah doesn't know. Andrew shook his head. And if Tate's mind conjured that person to warn us? He looked at Xavier. Then the question isn't just who was he. A pause. It's what Tate was trying to tell us. Was he trying to warn us that whoever this person is watching Noah or Tate? The room was quiet. Xavier looked at the footage again. I understand why you feel that way. Andrew nodded. I know how it sounds. It sounds like you're trying to describe something you witnessed but don't have language for yet. Andrew looked at him. Exactly. Xavier folded his hands. But whether we call it dissociation, another psychological process, or something else, the important question remains the same. Andrew waited. What caused it? Andrew looked back at the screen. Why did that stranger call us idiots and morons? What is going on in front of us and we can't see it, but Tate or this person can? At Tate's face. At the person who looked like Tate but didn't feel like Tate. I don't know. His voice softened. But I know one thing. What? Andrew stared at the frozen image. Tate was afraid of that person too. The incident was eventually forgotten. Or at least everyone acted like it was. After that night, Tate didn't have another episode. No seizures. No strange behavior. No sudden changes. No unfamiliar voice or unsettling personality made Noah and Andrew question what they had witnessed. Life slowly returned to normal. Almost too easily. Tate went back to being Tate. Noah never completely forgot. Neither did Andrew. Noah never asked Tate about what happened that night. Not once. Part of him wanted to. He wanted answers. He wanted to know if Tate remembered anything. If he knew what he had said. If he knew who that person was. But every time Noah thought about bringing it up, he stopped. Maybe because he was afraid of the answer. Maybe because he was afraid Tate wouldn't remember. Or worse. Maybe because Tate would remember. Andrew didn't bring it up either. No one noticed. At first, he wondered if Andrew had simply decided it wasn't his place. But deep down, Noah suspected something else. The recording had terrified Andrew. Or maybe Andrew didn't know how to explain what he had seen. Sometimes there were things people couldn't immediately put into words. And that night had been one of those things. Then June 1 arrived. The day Tate was supposed to give Chloe his answer. The decision that had been hanging over everything for weeks. Noah knew it was coming. He had tried not to think about it, but it was impossible. He believed Tate was going to stay broken up with her. Not because Tate didn't like Chloe. Not because he hadn't enjoyed their time together. But because Tate was Tate. That morning, Tate woke up in a surprisingly good mood. He got dressed carefully, preparing for his quarterly stockholder meeting. The meeting covered his annual sales and profits, and as usual, many members of his family would be attending. It was being held at Talia's house while she was out shopping. Tate stopped briefly at the word. Shopping. He smirked. The way he said it made it clear he had very strong opinions about the activity. Then he ignored it and continued getting ready. A suit. A tie. Everything is perfectly arranged. When Tate finally looked in the mirror, he looked like someone completely in control. Confident. Successful. Calm. The version of Tate the world saw. Noah watched him from the doorway. There was something almost strange about seeing Tate like that after everything that had happened. Ready? Noah asked. Tate nodded. Yeah, I'll be back by 6 o'clock. We'll eat dinner and have fun. Noah noticed something. Tate looked peaceful. And somehow that worried him. Because Noah had learned that when Tate made a decision, he rarely announced it. He simply did it. Noah arrived home around 5 o'clock. The drive had helped. Not completely. He decided he wasn't going to spend the entire evening worrying. Whatever Tate chose, whatever answer he gave Chloe, Noah would deal with it. Instead of making one of their usual meals, Noah decided to do something different. Something comforting. Something that felt familiar in a way he couldn't explain. He chose Canadian food. A little variety. A few traditional dishes. Something warm and filling. He prepared the meal carefully, taking his time with every detail. For the main course he made tourtière, a classic French-Canadian meat pie with a seasoned filling and flaky crust. For sides, he prepared poutine with crispy fries topped with cheese curds and gravy, along with buttered maple-glazed carrots and a simple salad to balance everything out. For dessert, he made Nanaimo bars, a rich Canadian dessert with layers of chocolate, custard, and coconut. The kitchen filled with the smell of everything cooking. For a little while, Noah felt normal. Like life was just life. Like there weren't impossible questions waiting for answers. At exactly 6 o'clock, everything was ready. Noah placed the food on the table. Then he looked around. He added a few candles. Nothing extravagant. Just enough to make the evening feel different. He put on soft music in the background. A small smile crossed his face. It wasn't about impressing Tate. Tate rarely cared about things like that. It was about creating a moment. A quiet one. A good one. Noah picked up his phone and sent a message. "Dinner is ready. Did you need more time or are you going to be home?" Then he waited. 6:15 passed. No response. Noah looked at his phone again. He told himself not to overthink it. The stockholder meeting could have run late. There were probably questions. Family conversations. Business discussions. Things that took time. 6:30 arrived. Still nothing. Noah glanced at the candles. One had already burned lower. He picked up his phone again and typed another message. "Hey, did the stockholder meeting go longer than expected? If I don't hear back from you by 6:45, I'll start eating. No pressure." He set the phone down. This time he didn't stare at it constantly. At least he tried not to. He sat at the table, listening to the quiet music and waiting. Because for all of Tate's independence, for all of his resistance to expectations and commitments, there was one thing Noah still believed. Tate would come home. He always did. By 8 o'clock, Noah had finished eating. The candles had burned lower, the soft music had faded into the background, and the second place setting across from him remained untouched. Then he shook his head. He wasn't going to make this into something it wasn't. Tate had a major meeting today, a stockholder meeting involving business, money, and family. Everything was fine. They didn't have to eat dinner together every night. They had never been that kind of couple. Their relationship had always been unconventional, built around their own routines and understanding. Noah closed the refrigerator door and stood there for a moment. Everything's fine, he quietly told himself. And he wanted to believe it. Maybe Tate had gotten caught in a meeting afterward, maybe something important came up, maybe he simply hadn't been able to get to his phone. There were plenty of reasonable explanations. He settled onto the couch and picked up a copy of Entertainment Weekly, flipping through the pages while eating. He tried to focus on the articles. The movies. The interviews. Anything that didn't involve thinking about Tate, Chloe, or the decision that had been hanging over them. The house was quiet. Almost peaceful. For a little while, Noah let himself forget about everything else. By 9 o'clock, he decided it was time to get ready for bed. There was something about the quiet that made every thought feel louder. Noah changed clothes, brushed his teeth, and started settling into his usual routine. Then he heard it. The front door opening. Noah froze for a moment. Tate was home. A small wave of relief passed through him. At least he was back. At least nothing was wrong. But the relief was quickly followed by curiosity. Tate had been gone for hours. And he still hadn't answered either message. Noah stood upstairs listening. He heard Tate moving through the house. The sound of his footsteps. The familiar rhythm of the person Noah had known for most of his life. For a moment, everything felt normal again. But Noah couldn't ignore the questions sitting in the back of his mind. What happened today? And what answer had Tate given Chloe? Noah was already in bed. The bedroom light was still on. He always kept a lamp on when Tate was coming home late, not because Tate needed it, but because Noah knew him. Tate had a habit of walking through rooms without paying attention to where he was going, especially when he was tired or distracted. Noah didn't want him stumbling over anything in the dark. He lay there quietly, listening to the sounds of the house. For a while there was nothing. Then he heard footsteps. Slow. Familiar. Tate was moving through the hallway. Noah looked toward the bedroom door but didn't say anything. He expected Tate to come in, make some sarcastic comment about him being awake, or maybe complain about how late it was. Instead, he heard the bathroom door open. The old hinges gave a small squeak. Noah turned his head slightly. A few seconds later, he heard Tate walk inside. Then the door closed. The sound of the shower turning on followed. Noah stared at the ceiling. The water kept running. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. Noah frowned. 30 minutes later, the shower was still going. Tate didn't take long showers. Actually, Tate rarely took showers at all. Water had always bothered him. A shower wasn't impossible for him. Noah glanced toward the bathroom door. The day must have been overwhelming. The stockholder meeting. His family. The pressure. And then Chloe. Whatever decision he had made, whatever conversation had happened between them, it had clearly affected him. Noah sat up slightly in bed. He listened to the water. 30 minutes was a long time for anyone. For Tate, it was almost unheard of. Noah wondered what was going through his mind. Was he trying to wash away the stress? Trying to calm himself down? Trying to escape into the one place where nobody could ask him questions? The shower continued running. And for the first time that night, Noah wasn't wondering what Tate had decided. He was wondering what had happened to make Tate need that much time alone. Noah had spent the entire day telling himself that he would come back. He had repeated it so many times that it almost sounded like a fact. But deep down, there had been a part of him that didn't believe it. If someone had asked him to bet money on whether Tate would return, Noah wasn't sure he would have taken the bet. Not because he thought Tate didn't care, but because he knew Tate too well. Tate had always been capable of disappearing when things became too overwhelming. He had spent his entire life convincing himself that leaving was safer than staying. And yet, despite everything, despite the empty closets and the note on the refrigerator, despite the fear that had settled into Noah's chest all day, Tate came home. The front door opened quietly. Noah looked up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Tate stood there, looking exhausted but calm, like he had been carrying the weight of something enormous and had finally set it down. Noah watched him carefully. Tate hadn't spent a single night away since the day he had announced that Chloe was his girlfriend and that she was part of his life now. No matter what happened, no matter where he went, no matter who else came into their world, Tate always came home. It was something Noah had stopped noticing because it had become so certain. Until that morning. Until Tate was gone. Without saying much, Tate moved through the room with the familiarity of someone who had never truly left. He changed out of his clothes, drank a glass of water, and then walked back toward the bedroom. Noah stayed quiet as Tate slipped into bed beside him. Noah had never seen Tate like this. Not in all the years he had known him. Tate had always been many things: intense, stubborn, dramatic. Impossible to predict, but desperate and clingy were not words Noah would have ever used to describe him. Tate was usually the person who pushed people away. The person who insisted he didn't need anyone. The person who acted as if needing comfort was some kind of weakness. But tonight was different. When Tate finally came into the bedroom, he didn't make a joke. He didn't complain about the late hour. He didn't tease Noah for still being awake. He simply got into bed. And then he moved closer. Tate rested his cheek against Noah's cheek, their faces pressed together in a way that felt strangely vulnerable coming from him. Noah stayed still. He could hear Tate breathing. Slowly. Deeply. Like someone who had been holding himself together for an impossibly long time and had finally reached the one place where he felt safe enough to stop. It reminded Noah of someone who had been running for miles through the day. Someone who had fought every battle, carried every responsibility, answered every question, and finally reached home. And now he was exhausted. Tate's hands moved gently over Noah's shoulders. The touch was careful, almost uncertain. Noah noticed that immediately. For someone who often struggled to express himself with words, Tate had always been more physical with his emotions. He didn't always say what he felt. Sometimes he couldn't. But he showed it. Through small gestures. Through staying close. through reaching out when he thought nobody was looking. Noah had always understood that about him. Tate could say he didn't care. He could insist he wasn't capable of love. He could build walls around himself and dare anyone to climb them. But moments like this told a different story. The way he held onto Noah. The way he sought comfort without asking. The way he trusted Noah enough to be quiet. Those things said more than any confession could. Noah looked down at him. For a moment he forgot about Chloe. Forgot about the unanswered questions. Forgot about the strange events that had shaken everything he thought he understood. All he saw was Tate. The person he had known for most of his life. The person who, despite everything he said, still reached for him when he needed someone. And Noah wondered what had happened that day to bring Tate home like this. Because whatever decision Tate had made, whatever words had been exchanged, something had changed. And for tonight, Tate wasn't running away. He was holding on. Then, just like he had done thousands of times before, Tate reached for him. His arms wrapped around Noah, pulling the blonde against him. The familiar gesture almost broke Noah's heart. Because this was what Tate did. He could struggle to say what he felt, he could hide behind silence, he could convince himself that needing someone was dangerous. But when it came down to it, his body always told the truth. He came home. He reached for Noah. That was when Noah noticed something he had almost never seen from Tate. Tate wasn't just lying beside him. He was holding him. The realization settled in slowly as Noah became aware of the way they were positioned. Tate had moved behind him, his arms wrapped around him, the two of them tangled together in the quiet darkness. They were spooning. For most people, it might have seemed like a small thing. For Tate, it was enormous. Tate had spent years insisting he didn't need anyone. He avoided vulnerability, avoided emotional conversations, and acted like depending on another person was something he would never allow himself to do. But now he was asleep behind Noah, holding onto him like letting go wasn't an option. Noah stayed awake for a while, simply processing it. This was Tate Blue. The same person who told everyone he was incapable of love. The same person who claimed he would be a terrible partner. Yet here he was, seeking comfort in the quietest way possible. Noah looked at him and realized that, in his own complicated way, Tate had always communicated. He just didn't speak the same emotional language as everyone else. And tonight, whatever had happened, whatever decision he had made, whatever weight he had carried home with him, Tate wasn't trying to run. He was trying to feel safe. Tate shifted closer until he was resting over Noah, the familiar weight of him bringing a strange sense of calm to the room. His cheek settled against Noah's cheek. For a while, neither of them said anything. Noah could feel the warmth of Tate's breath against his face, slow and steady, a reminder that Tate was finally relaxed after what had clearly been an exhausting day. Always fighting some invisible battle in his own head. But here, in the quiet of the bedroom, he wasn't trying to prove anything. He wasn't arguing, he wasn't pushing Noah away. He was simply there. Noah studied him carefully. This was the side of Tate that almost nobody else ever saw. The side that didn't come with a sharp comment or a sarcastic remark. The side that needed comfort but rarely admitted it. Noah had spent years watching Tate convince everyone, including himself, that he was someone who didn't need anyone. Yet moments like this told a completely different story. Tate trusted Noah. Not in a casual way. Not in the way someone trusted a friend to share a joke or a conversation. It was deeper than that. Whatever their relationship was, whatever name anyone else wanted to give it, Noah had never seen Tate behave this way with anyone else. Not with friends. Not with family. Not with anyone who came into his life. There was a version of Tate that only appeared here. When the world was quiet. When nobody was watching. When he didn't have to pretend he was invincible. Noah gently stayed still, letting Tate have the comfort he was seeking. Because he knew Tate well enough to understand something important. Sometimes the things Tate couldn't say were the things he showed the most. They had done this for nearly 8,000 nights. 8,000 nights of falling asleep tangled together, of finding comfort in the simple act of being close. It wasn't something they planned or questioned anymore. It was just theirs. Noah rested quietly in Tate's arms. After everything, the fear, the empty rooms, the note, the uncertainty, this was the thing that mattered. Tate was still here. And for tonight, that was enough. Noah woke the next morning slowly, still half caught between sleep and the quiet of morning. For a moment he didn't open his eyes. He expected the familiar weight of Tate lying on top of him the way he had so many times before. Tate had always been like that, never quite willing to admit how much he needed the closeness, but always finding some excuse to be near him. If Tate wasn't there, Noah never got out of bed before he woke. He was always the one who got up first. Tate was usually the one who stayed asleep a little longer, curled into the warmth they shared, until Noah's movement or the morning light finally pulled him awake. But this time was different. Noah slowly opened his eyes. The space beside him was empty. For a second, confusion replaced sleep. Then he remembered the night before, the way Tate hugged him closely and intently, but Tate wasn't in bed, he must be in the kitchen. Noah sat up slightly and yawned. The room was quiet. Outside the window, a light rain fell, soft enough that it almost sounded like a whisper against the glass. The gray morning made everything feel still and peaceful. Noah stared out at the rain. It was strange. He had spent so much time expecting Tate to be there, to be the first thing he saw when he woke up, that his absence felt louder than any sound. He smiled faintly to himself. For all of Tate's talk about not needing anyone, about being safest alone, there were things he did without even realizing. The way he reached for Noah in his sleep. The way he stayed close even when he couldn't say what he felt. The way he always found his way back. Noah glanced toward the empty side of the bed. "Tate," he called softly. No answer. For the first time in a long time, Noah wondered where Tate had gone before sunrise. And whether the boy who was always afraid of needing comfort had finally learned how to ask for it. The rambler felt wrong before I even left the bed. Too quiet, too empty, like the air itself had been cleared out. Tate's shoes were gone and so were his clothes. At first, he wasn't worried. Tate had always been unpredictable in the mornings. Maybe he had gotten up early. Maybe he had gone downstairs. Maybe he was making coffee or doing one of those quiet things he did when he couldn't sleep. But then Noah noticed something. The room felt different. Not empty. Erased. He got out of bed and started searching. Noah saw that every dresser drawer had been pulled open. It looked as though someone had ransacked every part of the bedroom Tate had once called his own. In the beginning, Tate had only asked for a single drawer, a cupboard, or even a small corner where he could leave a few belongings whenever he stayed over. After a few months, Noah had finally relented, giving him a third of the closet along with space for his shoes, belts, jackets, and everything else he wanted to keep there. Later, Noah had completely remodeled the bedroom, expanding the closet and nearly doubling its size so Tate would never have to cram his things into the tiny back cubbyhole again. He had wanted Tate to feel as though he truly belonged there. But now, standing in front of the open closet, the space felt cavernous. With only 2/3 of it occupied, the empty section where Tate's belongings had once been was an unmistakable reminder that someone had cleared out everything he had left behind. When Tate wasn't around, Noah sometimes found himself drifting toward the side of the closet that had once belonged to him. He would run his fingers slowly across Tate's shirts and jackets, feeling the familiar fabrics beneath his hand. A handful of times, when no one else was home, he had even slipped on one of Tate's sweaters or button-down shirts. It wasn't because he imagined a romantic future with Tate anymore. He had let go of that dream long ago. Instead, wearing Tate's clothes stirred something quieter and more complicated, a deep nostalgia that carried him back to his early teenage years when everything between them still felt possible. The scent had long since faded, yet the clothes still seemed to hold an echo of Tate's presence. Wrapped in them, Noah felt a fleeting sense of closeness, as though Tate's absence wasn't quite so complete. It wasn't romance anymore. It was familiarity, history, and the comfort of someone who had once occupied so much of his life. Noah kept the habit entirely to himself, never letting his friends see, knowing they would misunderstand what those private moments truly meant. Touching Tate's clothes wasn't just familiar or calming. They reminded Noah of everything that had come with being close to Tate. His proximity to Tate had given him more than a relationship. It had given him acceptance, belonging, and the kind of family he had never known growing up. Through Tate, Noah had met the Blue family, and over the years Tate's parents had quietly become the closest thing he had ever had to a mother and father. With his own mother largely absent from his life, Noah found comfort in the ordinary rhythms of their home: shared meals, holiday gatherings, birthday celebrations, and the simple feeling that someone expected him to be there. Every visit made him feel less like an outsider and more like another member of the family. Tate's aunts and uncles greeted him like a nephew, never questioning his place among them. Looking back, Noah realized that perhaps he had tolerated far more from Tate than he should have, because losing Tate also meant risking the only sense of unconditional family and belonging he had ever experienced. In many ways, it wasn't just Tate he had been afraid of losing, it was the entire life that had grown around him. Tate's side of the bed was neatly made, as though he had never slept there at all. Noah stood staring at the untouched pillows, struggling to reconcile them with the man who usually spent the night wrapped around him. Tate rarely slept on his own side for long. Before long, he would drift across the mattress until he was lying directly on top of Noah, one arm draped possessively around his waist, insisting that this was the only way he could sleep. Noah couldn't remember a single morning when he had woken before 8 and found Tate already gone. If anything, Tate had always been the one to complain whenever Noah tried to leave before breakfast, grumbling that mornings were meant to be spent together. He never would have slipped out without a word. Looking at the perfectly made bed now, Noah felt a quiet unease settle over him. Whatever had happened, it wasn't like Tate to leave without saying goodbye. He checked the bedroom first, then the bathroom. Nothing. Tate. His voice was louder this time. No answer. Noah walked through every room of the house. The living room. The kitchen. The dining room. The entryway. He opened closets, checked corners, and looked in places where Tate would normally leave something behind without thinking. Nothing. Not a jacket. Not a pair of shoes. Not a book. Not even some small forgotten item that belonged to him. Noah stopped at the front closet. He opened the door slowly. Empty. Completely empty. Tate hadn't brewed coffee the way the dark-haired man usually did this early in the morning. Ever since the Tina incident in college, Tate had made coffee for both of them. What had started as a small gesture had quietly become part of their routine, so familiar that neither of them thought much about it anymore. To anyone else, it was just coffee. To Tate, it was an unspoken promise he renewed every morning. The Tina incident had taught him that relationships weren't only damaged by the obvious betrayals or the dramatic fights. Sometimes they were worn down by careless words, petty decisions, and moments when pride mattered more than the person standing in front of you. He had hated realizing he'd contributed to Noah's pain, and he'd sworn he would never let something so avoidable happen again. Making coffee became his way of proving that promise without needing to say it aloud. It wasn't about the drink itself. It was about consistency. It was about waking up every day and choosing Noah before his own convenience, showing through actions rather than apologies that Noah's emotional well-being mattered. Every steaming mug placed into Noah's hands was a quiet declaration that Tate was paying attention, that he remembered, and that he intended to keep remembering. The ritual never erased what had happened in college, but it reminded both of them that people could learn from their mistakes. For Tate, brewing coffee wasn't a chore, it was one of the countless small ways he showed Noah he was committed to being the kind of buddy who nurtured trust instead of testing it. He stared inside, confused. It looked as if nobody had ever been there. As if Tate hadn't left anything behind at all. A cold feeling settled in Noah's chest. It wasn't just that Tate was gone. It was that everything connected to him was gone. The space looked untouched, almost too perfect, like someone had carefully removed every trace of a person who had been there moments before. Like somebody had gone through the house while Noah slept. Like somebody had erased Tate. Noah stepped back, his heart beginning to race. That wasn't how Tate left. Not Tate. Tate could disappear when he was hurt, he could shut down, he could retreat behind his walls. But he didn't erase himself. Not after everything he had said. Not after giving Noah the key. Not after standing at his door, expecting rejection and still choosing to come inside. Noah looked around the silent house. Tate. His voice cracked slightly. Because suddenly the empty rooms didn't feel peaceful anymore. They felt like a warning. And Noah knew one thing with absolute certainty. Something had happened. By the front door sat 5 trash bags. The remnants of Tate's discarded trash that hadn't been worth taking, old receipts, a cracked phone charger, the shirt with the torn seam he always said he'd fix were left for the garbage man. Discarded, sorted, finished with. My chest tightened in a way that didn't feel dramatic, just final. I walked into the kitchen like I was moving underwater. My eyes noticed a note on the fridge held up by a magnet we'd bought years ago during a memorable shopping spree at the mall. Tate's handwriting was neat, controlled, and impersonal. Noah stood in the quiet kitchen, staring at the small piece of parchment attached to the refrigerator. He hadn't noticed it at first. The emptiness of the house had consumed his attention, the missing clothes, the cleared closets, the absence of every small sign that Tate had been there. It felt impossible, like the morning had been rearranged while he slept. Slowly Noah reached out and took the note. The parchment was old-fashioned, nothing like the usual paper Tate would have used. It was thicker, rougher, and the edges scratched lightly against Noah's fingers as he lifted it closer to his face. He turned it over once, studying it. A handwritten note. Noah's stomach tightened. Tate's handwriting was familiar to him. He knew the way Tate wrote when he was rushed, the way his letters changed when he was angry or emotional. But this felt different. This felt deliberate. Careful. Noah brought the parchment closer, his eyes moving over the page. Then he began to read. As the words sank in, Noah felt the room grow colder around him. He didn't move. He barely breathed. This wasn't him needing space after an argument. This wasn't another moment where Tate had retreated because he didn't know how to ask for reassurance or ask for help from Noah or other people. This was something else. Something planned. Noah lowered the parchment slightly, his fingers tightening around the edges. The strange thing wasn't just that Tate had left. It was that Tate had prepared for leaving. He had removed every trace of himself, taken everything that belonged to him, and left behind only this one message. One piece of himself that Noah was allowed to have. Noah looked around the empty kitchen. The place where he had promised that no one, not Chloe, not anyone, could replace what they had. A painful realization settled over him. Tate had not disappeared because he didn't care. He had disappeared because, somewhere deep inside him, he still believed leaving was safer than staying. Noah folded the parchment carefully, refusing to crumple it even though his hands shook. Noah looked at the note and read the words printed on the page addressed to him, then his heart broke, his breath catching in his throat. It was nice knowing you, good luck with your life.